Hi, I'm back. And this is the second video in a three-part series on the differences between emotional self-regulation or management and emotional development. Now, if you watched the first video, I want to start by clarifying that I'm still a big fan of learning to regulate or manage our current emotional state. Coping style regulation or those in the moment emotional management strategies are effective. Part of my own personal growth progression included first learning healthier ways to calm and moderate the emotional state that I had at the time. I used healthy strategies to self regulate or manage my over responsive emotional system whenever I felt triggered or felt an excessive activation coming on. I used and sometimes still use temporary coping strategies like flexible thinking, exercise, deep breathing, mindfulness practice, tapping, and many other techniques. And I still strongly advocate for using them. I'm not suggesting that you give them up at all. And those in the moment emotional management techniques can provide relief for a very long time. And they also serve as a great tool when and if you decide to take it to a deeper, longer lasting systemic level. In other words, coping or self regulation strategies are not only just a quick fix, so to speak, they also serve as a great handrail for deeper developmental work. Said differently, emotional self regulation practices are effective tools that you can rely on for short term immediate relief while you're working on longer term foundational development. You can do both. Now, at this point, I sometimes get asked if I believe one approach is better than the other. And my answer is not necessarily. Whether you decide to stick to managing and regulating your emotions or you choose to develop them, that's really up to you. It's an individual choice. I mean, it's totally understandable that most of us simply want to do what's needed to get traction and some relief, and then take a break and coast a bit using the tools that work at the moment. Then, when we need more relief, we do more, right? I get it. I've done that myself. And learning healthy coping skills and emotional management strategies were the tools that got me the repeated moments of relief that I needed for a long time. It's only really when those in the moment self-regulation or management strategies stop working or don't work consistently across different situations, or we just get tired of feeling the way that we do inside and just feel like we're managing it all the time. That's when it may be worth digging in and doing the deeper work of actually refining and developing the underlying emotional nervous system state itself. And sometimes the signs that tell us when it may be worth considering that deeper work aren't that obvious. I mean, it's easy to get used to feeling a certain way, right? Especially if it's all we've ever known. So sometimes it's only when we keep having health issues, or our relationships keep falling apart, or we keep finding relationships hard to establish, or when we have some areas of our life going well, like maybe we have a great job and are highly skilled and super smart, but you still can't figure out that missing piece that's stopping us from having equal success in our marriage and relationships. Like, why am I doing so well here, but I'm tubing over here? Those are some of the other signs or symptoms that can tell us that it may be worth doing the deeper work. And if any of that sounds familiar, I mean, hey, surely can't hurt, right? I see self regulation or emotional management strategies, even the ones that are helpful and unifying in our relationships, sort of like a really good band aid for a wound, or like a sturdy brace for a weak ankle. Something that allows me to hike with less discomfort when I encounter rocky terrain. Self regulation or emotional management, no matter how you do it, it gets the immediate job done by addressing the symptoms in the moment, right then. And when they worked, I got immediate relief in situations whenever I became triggered or emotionally overactivated. And believe me, at one time in my life, there were many of those situations. Yet, despite being temporarily affected and using them frequently, my underlying default state, it stayed the same. I still felt a restless sort of urgency inside. I would just mislabel it at the time as passion, high energy, or being a go-getter. And my emotional response continued to overactivate or trigger in all sorts of situations. And although many of the behaviors that came out of that made me successful at my job, I mean, I was working long hours, I was doing more than my share of work, I was keeping pressure on myself with constant goal setting. They weren't having the effect I was looking for in my relationships. But I kept self regulating to manage it while redirecting my focus back to work. And it worked for a long time until it didn't. Eventually, all that overactivation combined with managing it all the time stopped working consistently or didn't work across different situations, which was seriously starting to impact my marriage. And finally, it just became exhaustive. I mean, what I'm describing here is basically a form of burnout in a nutshell. Finally, fatiguing from constantly managing, and for some, avoiding an overactive adrenal system. So, one of the big questions I get asked on this topic is this: if we use healthy self regulation strategies or management strategies combined with healthy habits for long enough, don't they just change or shift your emotional baseline state on their own over time? My answer is yes, but it's conditional. I believe it's possible for repeated temporary in the moment shifts in emotional state to lead to longer term, more systemic shifts if the strategies you use and the habits you choose are helpful and unifying, if they don't bypass, ignore, or unknowingly reinforce your current state, and if you do them consistently across a diverse set of situations over a long period of time. Now, that last part's the killer for a lot of people. Getting any kind of neurophysical or neurophysiological pattern change to stick requires a willingness to do consistent, repetitive work, especially in the first 4 to 6 months. I mean, that's just my honest experience, despite what research or others say about how long it really takes to get traction. Our bodies and brains will only adopt a new emotional state if we spend more time in it than we spend out of it. Like being in that calmer state more than half your day. And although we understandably may begin our work in more sheltered, comfortable, and safe environments, like initially surrounding ourselves with only like-minded people and pushing all the unhelpful people out of our life, eventually it needs to be honed or strengthened in a variety of real-life situations and with a variety of people. That's just what it takes if you want to become emotionally resilient. And all of that takes a lot of conscious, congruent, and consistent effort. So, yes, my answer is yes. If you can use them consistently and congruently across a variety of different situations without falling back into old patterns for too long, behavioral habits paired with emotional management strategies may be able to slowly influence your default nervous system state by way of reverse engineering, so to speak. But it can be a long, exhaustive process if we're exclusively relying on post-activation emotional self-management. In other words, if we're only regulating our emotions when the shit hits the fan, or when we are really got triggered, or when emotional overactivation is already in progress, that's a lot of heavy lifting to get through a day, right? So, backing up our emotional management practices with healthier habits can definitely improve your chances of success if you're consistent with those habits. And I'm talking daily and across many situations and scenarios. But if you're not also doing the deeper developmental work, well, it can be easy to skip days or fall off those habits. So that's when and why adding another layer of personal or emotional development work may be worth considering. So, as a final summary, if emotional self regulation stops working, or it stops working consistently across different situations, or if you can't seem to stick with new habits, or if you're doing really well in some areas, but other areas are just not adding up, or if you get tired of just managing anxiety or keeping a lid on it all the time, the additional option is to do the deeper work of actually refining, differentiating, and developing your emotional response itself. So you don't have as much to manage. You may be surprised at how much a new default emotional state changes your behavior, which in turn will start getting you the outcomes that you really want. But you do have to be willing to dig in a bit up front to do it. A sort of front load of effort with longer term relief as a payoff. So, in the next and last video of this series, we'll go over my thoughts on what it really takes if we do want to pursue emotional development. So, I hope to see you there.